Today we will build the golden triangle, the golden pentagon and the golden parabol. The project is to draw the plan of a parabol, taking into account the golden number for building step by step a solar parabol. I draw an horizontal I draw the main circumference. I measure the radius, which length is 936. Take the half, which point I will call r divided by 2. We will note that this distance between r divided by 2 and the apex of the vertical diameter, which determines the length of A, which the length is here, on the radius, the other side being B. The length of A will give us the length for new circle, and still another one which will cut the main circumference in P1 and T3. The apex of the vertical diameter is T2. And here we have the base of the golden triangle, T2, T3 with its apex in the center of my circumference, which I will call T1. This is the golden triangle, while if we join P1, T3, we will have one side of the golden pentagon. No. I measure the distance. And I have here my golden pentagon. While this diagonal between two sides of the pentagon will become, in fact, the diameter, the main diameter of my parabol, which will be in P1, P2 and P3. I draw the axe of the parabol, which will be oriented to the sun for my solar parabol, while the circle with length as a radius will touch the x, it is in f1, which will be the focal point of my solar parabol, which is all here, oriented to the sun. Ideally, as the pentagon could be oriented with the top to the zenith, like this, still oriented to the sun. The golden number is defined by the ratio A plus B divided by A equals A divided by B. This figure is 1.61 with still a few decimals. Initially, I have, on an empirical way, chosen two values for A and B, 289, 179 for B, which the ratio will give us 1.61. Amazingly, the difference between A minus B equals 1.1. Amazingly, again, if we measure one side of the pentagon, we will see that it is 11. Amazingly, if we measure the chord of one quadrant of the circle and the ratio between the quadrant of the circle divided by its chord, we will have the number 1.11. Ratio quadrant divided by the chord of the quadrant is 1475 centimeters divided by 1325 equals 1.11. Finally, if I measure the diagonal of my parabol, if I multiplied one side, which is 11, one side of the pentagon, 11 centimeters, multiplied by the golden number, we will find the length of my diagonal, which is about 17.75. Based on that findings, we will build during a second step, proceed to all the measurements which I drafted here for building the parabol.